Hi, welcome back to the podcast. And we are happy to have you as a viewer right now. And we are really happy to have a great person here, a great startup founder, and a great person as well that I'm sure you will enjoy a lot the conversation that we'll have with him. With us right now is Ali Moiz. Did I pronounce right, Moiz?
You got it.
Yeah, great. So it's a great pleasure to have you here. How are you?
Good, Rock. Thanks for having me. I mean, I'm excited to be here and chat and talk about some fun stories.
Yeah, that's the point. That's the point. We just met a few weeks ago. You gave us a great talk about your story as a startup founder and also as the life of being an entrepreneur. And your story is quite unique because you have changed so many times the direction of different ventures that you have had through your entrepreneurship life. So I think it's going to be really amazing. But I would like to start with having an introduction. So I would like you to give us an introduction about yourself, where you come from, and so on and so forth, because I think people will be really happy to hear about that.
Yeah, happy to. So I'm based in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area, but I'm actually not from here. I grew up in Pakistan, and sort of typical middle class household. And got a scholarship to come to college in America, and then dropped out and moved to California to do startups. And that was 20 something years ago, and I'm still here. Over that time, I've built and sold two companies, Peanut Labs, which was acquired by Dynata, and Streamlabs, that was acquired by Logitech. And I'm doing my third startup now, which is called PilotGPT. I've invested in a few startups along the way. I'm a terrible investor. And I love talking to founders and mentoring, advising, helping them, wherever I can. And I just wrote a book, which is how we met.
Yes.
I was giving a talk at another event. And so the book is really about these startups, and all of them have not ended up the way they started. So they started as something else, and they pivoted. Idea didn't work, pivoted again and again and again, and eventually found something that worked and worked really well. So that's been my story. A couple of good successes and hundreds of things that didn't work.
Right, but such is life. I think it has been kind of your DNA from the very beginning when you moved to the US, because you came here to study and then you drop out. So how do you, can you tell us a little bit about what you remember about dealing with that? Because I guess somewhat it was a disappointment for the family, maybe, or not?
Oh yeah. I've done all my startups with my brother, who's my co-founder.
Okay.
And it's just the two of us. And so he dropped out as well. And so my parents are Asian parents. You can imagine they're like, oh my God, both the kids are dropping out of college. Like, how did we raise them wrong? Like, what went wrong? Dropped out and moved to California. And the story there was we were working on, a little social networking site, sort of the early days of Facebook. And that blew up and got a few 100,000 users, and some VC found us and, came to our college and was like, here, I'll give you guys a check, but you have to move to California and you have to drop out, take some time off. So I told my mom, I'm just going to take a year off and that's it. I'm going to go back and finish. And
okay.
She reluctantly was like, okay, as long as it's only a year. Not
only
more.
A year.
And here we are 20 years later. I haven't gone back.
Yeah. Wow. So, how was the order of the events? You dropped first, and then your brother, or the other way around?
Same time.
Same time. Okay.
Same time. We were a couple of years apart, but we were at the same college, and we were like, let's do this. It's exciting. And if it doesn't work, you can always go back and finish and get your college degree.
Yeah, well, actually, it's the right time to do it in the sense of you can take more risks, you have less commitments in other places, and you can always go back to college. So I think that's one of the things that you hear a lot here in the Bay Area, in the Silicon Valley, that in the early 20s, it's probably the best time to take a lot of risks because you are more, it's easier for in that part of your life or with your commitments and so on and so forth. And also, I want to touch, because the other day I heard about other founder that has been working with his brother and so on. So how is working with a brother in a startup? Because the startups tend to be a little bit messy, and you have to make a lot of decisions, and sometimes there's conflict, and there's a lot of pressure, and so on and so forth. So tell us a little bit about this part of your entrepreneurship life, on the sense of how it's doing with your brother. I guess it's just fine because you have been working together for quite a while, but.
Yeah, it's worked out really well. We get along well, and we have complementary skills. And it's one of those things where I think it either works or it doesn't, right?
Yeah.
We also had some good friends join us, right, at early on in various projects or startups we did, and those did not always work out, right? So it's one of those things where, whether you do it with a friend or a family member, either it'll work out or it won't, right? There's no middle ground where it's kind of working so. So no, we've been really lucky, and I think it's a double blessing because you end up spending so much time with your co-founder that if it's like a close family member, you're just, it's a double blessing to be able to spend that much time with family.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I guess your parents end up being really happy, not only about the successes, but about you two being able to share a lot of time together.
Yeah. It's a good way to, keep a family very close together. And I often think about this, it's there are stories of people not doing startups, but doing family businesses in which they involve their kids later on as well. And so it becomes a multi-generational thing. And, the big benefit is not just to keep the business going. I think the big benefit is for families to stay together, right? Otherwise they get scattered and all over the place.
Right. Yeah, that's completely true. That's like you said, it's a big blessing. It's a big blessing to be around family and get along and working hard problems together as well, because life is hard in the sense of it's not easy. Let's go into that actually. One interesting thing about the book that you wrote and your stories that you said, I have 3 startups, 40 pivots. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about how is pivoting, because sometimes I guess when you're an entrepreneur, you start with an idea, you start with with a vision. If you change the vision radically, if you pivot, sometimes it's perceived as failure, which, by the way, is a failure in the sense of the market has shown you to move elsewhere, but sometimes the failure is, or the sense of failure is too big. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your funny stories, because I know there are many, funny, but also really interesting in the sense of the impact, the vision that you saw that were really good business and what happened. Maybe you can tell us a little bit, because I think it's going to be very inspiring for people, because that's something that any entrepreneur, any startup founder has to have, is in their DNA, in your DNA as founder, you have to be willing to continually pivot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you look at most successful startups, right, they did not start off that way. They started as something else, you know,
Right.
and sometimes they had to pivot once or twice. Sometimes they had to pivot many, many, many times, right? A fun example is a casual sort of video game company. The makers of Words with Friends. I think it's called. Was it? Forget the name. PopCap. I forget the name, but they were acquired by Zynga, right? I knew some of the team members on that team as well as the acquirer, Zynga, and their story came out, and it was incredible. Like, games are even more startup-y than startups in terms of either it'll be like a huge hit or a massive failure.
Right.
There's no middle ground, and 99% of the time games will fail, even more than startups. Startups, I think, are maybe 95% failure. Games are even more.
Oh, wow.
And so this company went through something like 36, 37 failed games, one after the other. And, the last one, they were like out of money. This was their very last shot. And they were like, it just worked. And it blew up and did really well. And they got acquired for hundreds of millions of dollars. But, my experience has been the same. And so my first startup, PilotLabs, did not start off as it was a B2B company selling surveys and market research to advertisers to judge effectiveness for ad campaigns or market research, right? And you're like, okay, but it started off as a campus events website that didn't work. That turned into we tried to compete with Facebook in the early days of social networking. And got pretty big, like sort of 10 million odd users, biggest social network in Turkey and a few other countries for a couple of years. But eventually sort of Facebook killed everyone with network effects and really good execution. And so, we had to pivot and but the fun story there is, like, we were trying to figure out, we had weeks of cash left, VCs refused to fund us, and I was like, okay, well, we have some users, what can we do to make money? So we threw some games up on the site, and we put in these points that people had to buy to play games, and we called them peanuts, right? And it was a credit card form, and like a few people paid, but it was enough to get payroll and get us through like a few months of runway. But then, like, crazy things started happening. Like, there were girls on the site that started contacting our engineers and sending them like nude selfies in exchange for peanuts. They're like, give me selfies, give me points to play these games. And they're just like simple web games, right? Free. And that really was like an indication that we were onto something big. It's like, if your users are crazy enough to do something like that, maybe these points have like real value. So we really spent some time on it, and that turned into like this B2B business later called PilotLabs, where we built like this whole points engine that other game developers could plug into their games, and users could take points for surveys for points, and then advertisers sort of paid for the value chain for market research. But again, that business went through a few different pivots, and there's so many pivot stories. Every time I do one of these talks, like, I don't know what stories I'm going to share.
That's okay. That's okay.
But there's a bunch more. We can keep going.
Yeah, well, if we go through that, set of stories of pivots, I remember when I was hearing you in the last talk. You were talking about something about luxury cars, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe you can tell us how you actually end up in that business, and also what happened on the sense of why you left that. Because I think you mentioned that it was in some way a good business.
Yeah. I just sold my first company, and I was going through this phase where I was really into sports cars, and like any sort of young, brash entrepreneur, you go through this phase, sports car phase. I was like, yeah, like, wouldn't it be cool? and Airbnb was like taking off, and like the sharing, peer-to-peer sharing economy. So we're like, and I was big fans of like, we were all fans of Top Gear, like the TV show, car show. And so we put together this peer-to-peer car sharing site for like luxury, like high-end cars called High Gear. We did some smart marketing and had 400 sort of cars on the site, and it was doing about $1 million in revenue. And things look good. Like in the first year, less than a year, we were doing that revenue. And then we got hit by a sort of criminal car gang
Oh, wow.
out of LA that came up to the Bay Area, and I think they stole like 6 cars worth about $500,000 in 1 hour across the network, right? And they were using fake IDs, fake credit cards. My co-founder like met the guy who stole his car, right?
Oh.
So like it was peer-to-peer rental. So you'd meet the person and then like sign that or whatever, and then hand them the key, and then they'd bring your car back. And it was insured, right? So we took care of insurance and everything. But it was peer-to-peer. And so it was crazy. My co-founder actually met the guy who stole his car.
Right.
And I had a bunch of friends whose cars got stolen, and that sucked. Like,
Oh, really?
Insurance covered everything, so everyone was okay. And the police eventually found all the cars because they all had trackers in them. But like the cars were thrashed, people were using them for like drugs or like getaway cars. They were just completely thrashed and totaled. We were just like, this sucks, man. The unit economics on this business were just not that good to deal with things like this. And we pivoted out of it and ended up doing something else. But there were some really fun business. That was one of the most fun businesses.
I can tell.
That I wish had worked.
Yeah, well, it's the kind of things that when you're an entrepreneur, when you're a founder, there's many things that you do not expect to happen. I mean, if you look backwards, it's obviously, of course, it's gonna happen, or it might happen. But in the middle of doing all this stuff, sometimes it's difficult to see, right?
Yeah, totally. It's everything looks very clean and nice in hindsight, but when you're in there, it's hard to know. Yeah.
Yeah. If you think about that specific business that you were on, the luxury cars, what would be if you were able at that time to foresee that kind of stuff, or make sure that it won't happen, and so on and so forth, where do you think this business will be right now?
Yeah, so it's one of those cases where like sometimes I've been through maybe 40, 50 different pivots, and it's funny, I wrote the book and some friends were like, did you put that story in of like that pivot? And I'm like, oh shit, I totally forgot. So there are like a bunch of pivots I just completely forgot about, and they're not even in the book. So it maybe should be more like 50, 60 pivots.
Oh, really?
But yeah. But there's some pivots like that car one where I wish, even though the numbers were telling me otherwise, and the data was saying it's a shit business, like it was just exciting and emotionally very compelling, and I was attached to it, and I feel like I should have just stuck to it. There were a few cases like that. And there's some other companies in the space that some did, some didn't do well, like Get Around, but there were a few like Turo, they were peer-to-peer car sharing, and now it's huge. You can go almost anywhere around the world and get a Turo. It's kind of like Airbnb for cars, right?
Right.
So it was possible, and they, built a business by kind of sticking through it. And so there are a few cases where like I wish I had listened to my heart, not my head. Another example of that was one of the pivots we tried was an esports team. I was a gamer and loved video games, and it was the early days of like Twitch. If you're familiar with Twitch, a lot of people watch games on Twitch. Championships were just getting formed around games, right? So it was the early days of esports, like 2013, 2014, like.
Got it.
And League of Legends was blowing up, which is very popular in Latin America as well, right?
Yes.
Still, 15 years on.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And so we put together an esports team for League of Legends in North America, and it was called Vulcan, and ended up being the number 2 team in the first season of LCS that happened, which is the Riot Games Championship series that they organized. And, team did reasonably well, but it was a pain in the ass to kind of run and manage, and everyone was telling me, like, look, this is not a software business, this is just like a coaching thing and a hobby, and, you're managing these players who just don't want to work very, like they get these groupie girlfriends and they don't want to play hard or work hard anymore. And so, I put the team together for $15,000. We sold it a year later for $150,000, and I was like, okay, fine. We, spent some time on it. It didn't work very well, but it was okay. But a top 3 team in the LCS a year after that was worth $10 million.
$10 million?
Yes.
Wow.
Just a year after I sold it, right? A year after that, they were worth $100 million.
$100 million? Wow.
And year after that, they were worth $300 million.
$300 million? A team? Wow.
A top 3 team. Just because esports took off and the valuations and people came into the space. So again, it was one of those things where had I listened to my heart, not my head, some of those ideas I think probably were worth sticking to a little bit longer. But most of the time, it's good to pivot. People often stick to an idea too long, 2, 3, 4 years. And it's obvious, look, it's not working. You probably should have pivoted years ago.
Right.
So that's the more common mistake. But sometimes it's worth listening to your heart, even if the data is telling you otherwise.
Right. So going into that, because I think it's a quite interesting topic to think about, not only from your mental point of view or from the data that you are getting, but also from what you feel, what you get on what is your gut feeling, what is your heart telling. So what would be your advice in order to be able to, let's say, listen more to your heart, in the sense of how can an entrepreneur and a founder can be sure that he or she is listening to the heart and it's not the mind speaking?
Yeah. So, so I've been doing startups 20 years, right? And building as a founder. And the frame of mind, sort of, as a founder, you're always looking for okay, is there product market fit? What do customers want to pay for? How do I find these customers? Okay, what do I build? How do I test my hypothesis? And then, okay, I have okay, something's working. How do I scale it up? How do I raise money? You're always in the how do I do this? And how do I find where I think that can often get you involved in things that you don't really care about. And if you don't care about the thing you're doing deeply, obviously you're going to care about it to some level if you're doing it, but if you don't care about it deeply, when it's not working, chances are you'll give up, right? And most founders give up after the first or second thing that doesn't work. 9 times out of 10, founders will just give up when the first idea they had didn't work. They're like, okay, sorry investors, it didn't work. Versus problems that you care about irrationally, even you would work on for free, that's a good question to ask. Or things that give you enough emotional energy to work on them for 1, 2, 3 years, even if there's not a single paying customer or a dollar of revenue. If you use that framing to find out things, those make for really interesting projects. A good example is, the IPO market in the US has been broken for 30 years. In 1990, there were more publicly listed companies in the US than they are today, right? Just in terms of number of companies. And what's happened is companies have been going public later and later and later in their life cycle. So I have to check the exact numbers, but 30 years ago, there were 8 to 10,000 companies in the public markets in the US. Today, there's 5,000 that, of any market cap. and so they're going public late. Like if you look at startups like Stripe, SpaceX,
Yeah.
OpenAI, Anthropic, none of them are public companies,
Not
right?
yet. Yeah.
And SpaceX is about to IPO, but they're going to IPO at $1 trillion 5,
Yes.
right? Like, which is crazy.
It's crazy.
And so like all of that value creation has happened in the private markets and not public, right? So that means that normal retail unaccredited investors, which is like 95% of the population, has not been able to participate in any of that, right? And that was a problem that I just like was fascinated by and I cared about deeply. And that's how my third startup started, as a way to kind of address that problem. And as part of that, we did, we allowed people to invest into pre-IPO startups through a bunch of clever mechanisms, SPVs and whatnot. And this is literally a story from just like 2-3 years ago, right? And we did deals into like SpaceX and Anthropic and a few other great startups, Stripe, Epic, Flexport, etc. And we hit a point where like I loved the business. It was so much fun to work on it. My team liked it. We were making revenue, right? Not huge, but like there was revenue. It was very hard to grow that business, and the data was telling us like, look, this is not a platform. It's more like a lifestyle fund business. Like if you were a fund manager or a VC, like you could do this, but there's no software platform here. And like the people who had been doing this for like 15-20 years hadn't really gone anywhere, right? And so there were all these data points that were saying, same thing, right? Like the car thing, shitty business, get out, right? But I was like, oh man, I really like this problem. I like we were doing so many cool things, and I'm still fascinated by that problem. It still has not been solved. Like dozens of people are trying to solve it. It's still not solved. And so we pivoted out of it. And 2 years later, companies in that space, there were 3 sort of billion-ish dollar transactions just in the last few months in that space, right?
Oh, wow.
Where companies were getting acquired by like Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and Charles Schwab, and who were all looking to enter into sort of this space. And, it was one of those things where like, again, listening to heart, not head, is a good barometer of finding things that you should work on that may not be big today, but if you stick to it, can become huge in the future.
Yes.
So it's a good way. Yeah, ask yourself that question, Rock. Like, what is something that you would work on for free for the next 2 years if nobody paid you or you didn't have a single customer? Yeah,
that's a great way of framing the analysis, or let's say, it's not even a full analysis, so to say, but it's like you say, listening to your heart. Actually, I was just speaking a few moments ago with another founder, and I want to bring this story here because I think it really connects with what you are saying, in the sense that she is really looking for start her own, to follow on her own startup. But what I tell her, because she was kind of making a decision between one path or the other path, like a dichotomy, like something is either this path or the other path, and they are not entirely related. But what I told her is, you have to follow your passion. Like you said, you have to follow your heart, because when you are passionate about something, it's when you can do it for free, for sure, because you really care about the problem that you want to solve. And like I heard the other day, you have to be in love with the problem, not necessarily with the solution, which is kind of it's counterintuitive in the sense of you want to achieve a solution. But sometimes, and from being a founder, this solution is something that is revealed through the path of following the problem and care about the problem and trying to solve the problem. But sometimes we fall in love with one solution, or we fall in love with a business model that should be here in order to actually be a profitable business, like you said. But like you said, it has proven that if you stay a little bit longer, or if you really are deep into that and you are passionate, it's better to keep there, not only because you will be following what is standard in the market for growing a company or whatever else. So yeah, it's something that I think we should follow the passion and keep on it as long as the fire is inside, you know?
Yeah, yeah. For love the problem, not the solution, I think is also a good way to put it.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I'm talking about all these pivots. Like you were saying in the book, you have 40, but probably now counting, it's around 60. I think it's important to talk a little bit about persistence and also about grit, because as you may imagine, most of the people is not willing to, or is not used to, let's say, not even willing, it's not used to be in front of so many, let's say, failures or learnings, other ways, is other way to put it. But what are the let's say the traits, the personal traits that you will see, that you have, or that you have developed through time in order to be able to do so many pivots in so many different areas as well? Because sometimes most of us always stay in the same areas. Let's say I work in technology, or I work in agriculture, or whatever. We try to stay in the same area. So what are your reflections on that, on the traits, on what it takes in order to be great, to have grit and to pursue your endeavors?
Yeah, I mean, think of it as, I think startup founders should think of themselves as athletes, and that is a good frame to think about what it takes to succeed at the Olympics, right? As somebody said, a friend of mine said, startups are like the Olympics of business. So you're not just running a business, you're running a highly leveraged, incredibly difficult version of a business that is designed to grow very, very fast, and versus like a more traditional business, which you can also do, right? But startups are, so as an athlete, you have to take care of yourself. You have to put in the hours, crazy training, right? Obviously. But you have to grind through all of that training, deal with injuries, deal with all of the reasons that like you should not be doing this sport, which is crazy. You could get a job and just chill and still be, why are you pursuing this? So you have to be irrational to some extent, right, as an athlete. But it takes a lot of grit. Think of it as a marathon runner, right? And so when people want to do a startup, my first question usually to them is like, look, are you willing to commit 10 years of your life to this?
That's a great question.
Right? Like, okay, let's say most adults have like 40 to 50 years of productive life, right? Like you start at 20, you work till maybe 60 something, and 40 to 50 years of, are you willing to take 10 years of your life and throw it into something? Right? Yes? Okay. Are you willing to, no? Then okay, don't do a startup. Yes? Are you willing to basically, as Elon Musk said, chew glass and stare into the abyss and fail for most of those 10 years? Right? Basically be a failure to yourself, to your team, to your parents, to your friends, to your community. Anyone who looks at you from the outside be like, what are you doing? You're wasting your life. This is going nowhere. Are you willing to do that? Right? And still sort of, and the qualities that I think have helped, the things, I think the tactics, the setup, I think it's more about your environment rather than just your personality. Like people often focus on personality traits and say, okay, this person is very persevering, doesn't give up. Like, okay, that's table stakes. But in addition to that, I think you need a really good relationship with your co-founder. your co-founders. I think doing it alone, giving up is very easy. Having a small, tight-knit team that you really care about, you do it for each other. It's like when let's say you're running a marathon or mountain climbing and you're in a team, right? Like you want to get to the peak, and oftentimes like one person or two people or three people on the team are just like ready to give up, but they keep going for each other. Because if they give up, like the whole team gives up, right? So having a great co-founder, taking care of yourself, right? Get the basics right, like sleep, diet, exercise, find ways to de-stress and do a lot of them, right? So like things like meditation, walk in the park, having some friends who are also co-founders that you can kind of shoot the shit with, talk about problems with.
Right.
And then being irrationally, we talked about this earlier, being irrationally in love or connected to your problem, I think helps give you mileage, right? Because if you don't really care about the problem, the first time you try a product, it doesn't work, you're like, okay, well, that didn't work, let's go do something else, right? Or I'll give up, I'm done. Versus like if you really care about the problem, you'll stick around longer. Having a reason that you're doing this other than money is very, very important.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Because risk adjusted, making money startups are not the best way to make money.
Yeah. It's a big
Getting a job at a big company and climbing the corporate ladder is a much better way to make money.
Yeah. It's more, it's less risky. Way less risky. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. That's in what I have seen from not being in the Bay Area, in the Silicon Valley, but people in Latin America. What I see in general is that it's really hardworking people and very entrepreneurial, because sometimes the markets are not so developed, so people have to find a way by themselves. The job market is not as large, not as let's say rich, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of entrepreneurial mindset in the culture, in the societies, in different countries in Latin America. So yeah, it's from a different point of view. I guess this more or less the same might happen in Pakistan as well, or in other parts of the world for sure. But when you are facing adversity, but you have to keep up with life. You find a way to do it. I mean, and that's life actually. That's life as well. And I guess something that I have learned through the time is that sometimes we have a desire or a dream, so to say, or a vision. And when we have a dream or a vision, what I have learned through the time, maybe not the first time, but after several years, is that somewhat life always presents you the right opportunity at the right time. But sometimes also happens that we have a fixed mindset of how to reach the goal. And if we have this fixed mindset, what happens is that we start to avoid whatever is not in that fixed mindset or fixed path that we have foreseen, so to say. And what I have learned through the time and by missing opportunities like you mentioned is that we have to be able to listen to things that is happening in our environment, keep the vision, but understand that the path that we foresee, it's okay to have kind of a path, a mental path, but also be able to adapt to whatever life brings you. So that's I think is really important. And having said that, also I want to hear about what do you think about AI? Because AI is like a tsunami. It's going to be a transformational thing in our society. It's not only for businesses. It's not only for, let's say, startups or new services. That's, of course, coming. But it's also about it's transforming the way the society functions and so on and so forth. So one of the things that I really care about a lot is what messages we can give to the society, professionals, general society, in anywhere, on what's coming and how to adapt to that. And I would like to hear your perspective on that, because you are an entrepreneur in the Bay Area where everything is happening regarding AI. Well, not only in Bay Area, but Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley. So maybe you can tell us a little bit, what are your perspectives, and how are you actually using Gen AI or AI in general for your new startup, or how do you see, and what advice you have for professionals in general, not only for people who are founders, but in general population?
Yeah. So, I'm doing an AI startup now, right? For AI for pilots, general aviation. It's called PilotGPT. And so we're kind of dealing with this day to day. AI helps us write code, most of the code there. So there's like a order of magnitude improvement in speed and output. I think AI is overhyped in the short run, like 1 to 2, 3 years, and underhyped in the long run, like 10 to 20 years. And so I think this is going to replace a lot of knowledge working jobs, like white collar jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody really knows the details, right? But I think the best thing you can do, if you're not an AI company or working directly in AI, you don't have to be, right? There's lots of areas and businesses to work in. But one of the best things you can do is become a power user of these tools. Just try them if you haven't tried them, and try to figure out what they're good at and how you can use them. Because I think this is sort of personal advice but also professional. Both individuals and companies can do this. Like if they become power users of these tools, they're going to be very well positioned for whatever comes next. And everyone else is going to really be left by the wayside, right? So, whether it's writing a lot of code through these models, or using them for planning or delegating or managing, or agentic workflows, or sort of reducing cost, increasing go-to-market throughput, whatever it is that you end up using it for, just personal, personal development, health, wellness, coaching. There are like hundreds and hundreds of use cases. Like the other day, just this week, I was going to go see the dentist, and we were going to do, I don't know, like fix something in one of my teeth, and I was like, wait a second, let me upload the x-rays to these models and see what they say. And we ended up changing what we were going to do based on like what the model said, right? And the models so I think, the speaking of healthcare, there's like the startup that now does like primary care for free, completely for free, right? You can sign up and have AI give you an analysis, and a doctor will double check it, and then you'll get a prescription that you can take and get treatment at a pharmacy or hospital. It's kind of insane. Like a lot of these like specialized work domains, are going to be mostly replaced. So the best thing I think anyone can do to prepare for the future is to be a part of the future and become a power user of these tools.
Yeah. A power user, dive into that as much as possible and start to use in whatever the way they find fit for their work.
Exactly. Yeah. And often like I'll run into people who say, oh yeah, like we tried it, but it wasn't very good, and that was like 6 months ago. But like in 6 months, the whole thing is different, right? So like coding models, for example, were basically useless till like December, until Claude came out with, was it 4.5, 4.6 or something, right? And that was like a step function improvement.
Yes, 4.5.
Yeah. and then it went from like being kind of useful for like MVPs, prototyping, to like actually doing production work, right? And it's still not 100%, but it's like 10x better, and that just happened. And so every few months, like the landscape changes, right? Like Cloud just released like Cowork and Cloud Design, and OpenAI released Codex, all in the last 4 months, right? And Gemini is like great for a lot of consumer use cases and image models and video models. So like image and video are maybe a little bit behind, where image, video, and voice are behind where like text is, for obvious reasons. Text is easier to deal with, but like all of those modalities are going to catch up. One of the features like we have on our app for pilots is an offline on-device model that runs in the plane, right? Because you don't have internet always in most planes. And so we needed something that could be running on device, but like you don't have an NVIDIA H100 running in the plane, right? No. So like you have this thing,
right?
Or you have an iPad, or like you have other shitty hardware. And so we've had to kind of figure out how to make small models do great things. And just the quality of the models since we started working on. So the feature was like transcribing radio communications into text form that a pilot can read and not miss important things that are being said. That was one of the features.
Because it's difficult to hear sometimes. I mean, most
it's difficult. Yeah.
It's
very hard to, especially for like newer pilots, like, and so like just that feature, the models have been like, it didn't work a year ago. It didn't even work like 6 months ago, but now it's starting to work because the models are just getting better and better and better. It's kind of like Moore's law, like you could bet that the cost to deploy a chip, build a chip, is going to halve every 18 months or so, whatever it is, 2 years, right? Moore's law. And that's played out spectacularly for like the entire semiconductor industry over like the last 50, 70 odd years, right? Give or take. And so there's a version of that for AI, which I think is a pretty safe bet, is to say like these models will get twice as good and cost half as much, let's call it every year
or so.
Every year, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so like just project that out, and we know it's going to happen because there's an insane amount of infrastructure investment that's gone into AI across the globe, right? Like insane. The amount of data centers and chips and electricity and like all of that is being played out. So like the people who work on the models are just going to have basically the closest thing to unlimited resources that planet Earth has ever provided to anyone for anything. Okay. And so these guys are absolutely going to have not just Moore's law, but crush Moore's law for the next many, many, many years. And so these models are just going to get insane. And if you're not working on one of the models yourself or in an AI company, I think the best thing to do is to become like a power user. Really find ways to help you at work, personally. And I think that it's a fertile land of opportunity. And there's like 1,000 startups every month that launch doing something in AI, but I think it's still early days.
Yeah, the opportunities are massive. I mean, the value creation that's going to happen, and it's happening actually, but it's going to happen more and more with AI. It's going to be massive, and I think emerging markets have a tremendous opportunity. And also, I think it's also the AI will allow the humanity and countries and companies to provide or create more abundance of everything, because everything will be easier to produce. It's just like electricity, Electricity at the very beginning was a great, invention, but not everybody had access because there was no grids and so on and so forth, plants, everything. But once it started to build infrastructure and people get access to electricity, things change. and change, let's say, for good, because then you can use machines and whatever else. I think the same will happen with AI in the sense of if we follow that analogy, AI is basically like having a wire with intelligence flowing through the wire. And you can use intelligence for whatever you want. It's like electricity. You get the electricity, you use it for whatever you want. But once the electricity is in your house, then a lot of appliances are invented, distributed, new businesses that didn't exist before. All this stuff. So following on that idea, what do you foresee for the next 3 or 4 years? What changes are going to come? I know it's difficult to predict, but since you are already working on models and the AI and trying to solve a specific problem for pilots and aviation and so on and so forth, in the general sense of what we should expect to be happening in the coming years, but like you said, maybe in the short term is overhyped, and maybe in the long run, or 10 years or more, is going to be even more transformational. But what do you foresee in the coming years?
Yeah, I think this is underhyped in the long run, overhyped in the short run. It's hard to see. It's one of those things where, like, if you asked somebody, before the telephone was invented, like, look, here's like a crappy version of like the first telephone or electricity. What are they going to be used for? And probably the first use cases were industrial and business and military, right? Those were, and then eventually it just went down to consumer, and there were phones everywhere and there's electricity everywhere. So if we follow that analogy, I think business use cases are probably going to be the most transformative. Business, industrial, government, military, all that stuff. And then the consumer stuff is starting, but it hasn't quite hit that level of like, I cannot live my day without it yet. But that's probably going to happen. And so if I was to speculate, I think robots used in workflows, physical robots are probably coming in drones with intelligence, all sorts of software. Software is probably going to become very personal rather than, okay, here's a SaaS tool and everyone just figure out how to use it. A lot of businesses are going to start writing their own software that they would never have bothered to do before. So like, I heard this story of like a guy who's never worked in software, but was like an HVAC guy, right? Heating, plumbing kind of guy, owns one of those kinds of businesses. A bunch of those folks are like just using AI to kind of write internal software for their own teams, right? And either save money or, more importantly, boost productivity within their own businesses. So like that's the low-hanging fruit. Like the crazy stuff, I think, is hard to say. We may have, we're probably going to have self-driving cars soon. But beyond that, self-driving planes, self-flying planes, self-flying air taxis, some version of Optimus in every business, maybe every household. Those are some of the things that are further out to see. I think there's also going to be an explosion of sort of scientific discovery and intelligence.
True.
Where scientists, are also going to be able to do a lot more with a lot less and faster, much faster. So, fundamental science, but also applied sciences, especially applied sciences, I think, are just going to massively leapfrog in terms of, there are AI models that focus on drug discovery, protein folding, chemistry,
Yeah.
applied materials, that sort of thing. That's the low-hanging fruit. Healthcare, right?
Yeah.
Analyzing like so all of that. I mean, I just there's it's a little scary to think about that level of change, but also like it's, I'm optimistic because ultimately it'll make life better for everyone.
Yes, that's what we always are looking for, to create this abundance and this improvement in life to reach millions of people, or the whole world. Well, it has been such a great talk. We have covered several things, and I think the insights has been such amazing. But I would like to finish with one thing from you. You've been a successful founder with several exits in the Silicon Valley. What would be your advice to, let's think about this, for a young founder in, let's say, in outside of the United States? It might be Latin America or even in Pakistan or elsewhere, that is really willing to get into this AI wave and start a new company and grow and everything. What would be your advice for this young founder? I don't know, maybe where to focus or how to deal with all this, how to get into this tsunami of change, and
these kinds of changes are always really good for young people. So it's a great time to be a young person right now. If you're a young startup founder or thinking about technology, or even not a startup, just a regular business that's like a software business or tech business, I think these sorts of changes like break the existing social order and create massive short-lived opportunities that young people are best positioned to take advantage of, right? The older someone is, the harder it is for them to change and adapt to this new world. Whereas somebody young, and like, look, I've heard the counterpoint also. People are saying like with AI, like people aren't, young graduates, software graduates aren't getting jobs, right? So there is that also. But I think if you're like a recent college grad or even younger and thinking about all this stuff, like, look, I mean, you can write software without knowing how to code. You can solve problems without really knowing how to code. You can make computers work for you, even if you don't know the language, right? So you use that, go out there, build something, solve somebody's problem around you. There's nothing holding you back. People are using tools like Replit and Lovable and others to build solo businesses from scratch, really, really easily and amazingly. So lean into it, lean into the change, and really become a power user. I think even if you don't end up building a business or a startup, I think it makes you incredibly employable, because legacy companies are looking for people like that who can come in and teach their teams on how to be more efficient, how to use these tools, how to get ahead, right? And then, so that's AI. I think outside of AI, I would say, as a startup founder, just don't give up. Just keep going. Find anything that'll help you keep going another month, another year, and keep your energy up. Do the things that give you energy. Dalton Caldwell from YC has said this, where startups don't die when they run out of money. They die when they run out of founder energy. When the founders run out of optimism. So find a way to just keep going, and then keep trying a bunch of things, and something good will happen.
Okay, well, That's a great advice, Ali, and I'm really happy to have had this conversation. I'm pretty sure all the audience will really appreciate your insights and everything, and thanks for taking the time for doing this. And for the audience, following your heart, and also don't give up and become a power user, because this is the time to create, to expand the creativity and bring everything that you have inside to society and create great impact. So thank you very much, Ali, again, and bye-bye to all the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Rock. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Yeah.